Hey everyone, welcome back to Corporate Elements. I'm Robbie, and today's conversation is one that genuinely stayed with me after hearing our guest TED Talk. Joining us today is Savio Clement, a TEDx speaker, wellness strategist, and resilience expert who works with leaders and professionals navigating pressure, burnout, and emotional exhaustion. After battling stage 3 blood cancer twice, Savio transformed his experience into helping people better understand healing, leadership, clarity, and sustainable performance. Savio, thank you for joining us today. Could you please tell us about yourself and your business, the Human Dissolve?
Thank you so much, Rohit, for the introduction. I really appreciate it. And thank you for having me on. As you mentioned, large breadth of my experience, not only professionally, but also personally. Keynote TEDx speaker, board certified health and wellness coach, journalist. At this point, I've interviewed over 2,000 plus leaders, change makers, and also celebrities, best-selling author, and like you mentioned, two-time cancer survivor. That portion really shocks people because when you think of getting a diagnosis of cancer once is shocking enough and what that entails in terms of treatment and recovery, and then being cancer free for a decade and then having the cancer resurface in a different part of the body and then having to go through a very lengthy and arduous experience. We're talking about 2 3 day hospital stays, stem cell harvesting, stem cell transplant, 29 days in the hospital. I lost 26 pounds, had to be rushed to the ICU one night to get norepinephrine. I got out of the hospital. They did scans. Fortunately, I got a complete response to treatment. Then I had to still undergo an immunotherapy as a backup just in case, which was about 4 months. And then I did 5 months of physical therapy. So we're looking at 16 months of of recovery in general. And I tell you this because, yes, this situation is very dramatic, but this could apply to any one situation, whether that is a death in the family of a loved one, a business loss, being fired, having someone leave you, whatever tragedy or whatever challenge you have. I think it really behooves us to actually ask the deeper question. The deeper question is not why me or why this, but the deeper question is what, with this experience, can I actually resolve in my own life? What is this experience trying to actually teach me about my own capacity for challenge? What is this experience trying to teach me about where I stand in the world beyond my identity, beyond my role, beyond my responsibility? What is life, the universe, God, Shiva, whatever you believe in, trying to actually show me in this moment? And I think when you ask that question, you also then have to say to yourself, what can I surrender to that question? So I was in the hospital, like I mentioned, for 29 days. In those 29 days, I only had two anchors that were freely available to me. I had silence and I had stillness. And no matter what belief system you believe in, those two things are paramount and they're easily accessible to any of us. And in that silence and stillness, I remember thinking to myself, I can't control these markers that the doctors are looking for. I can't control my platelets, my red blood cells, my white blood cells. But what I could control is how I feel about myself in this moment, how my mental acuity is still alive, how my spirit still wants to live. And I could actually give that more energy rather than thinking I have a loss at the moment, thinking that actually life is showing me something that I can actually transform and turn into something that's positive.
Wow. So, after going through something as life changing, uh, how did your understanding of discipline and resilience evolve beyond the usual stay strong mindset?
So we spoke briefly previously that my parents are from Goa, India. I came to the States when I was 3 years old. Like any individual or any child that comes, you want to assimilate. So I assimilated really well to the culture. Although my mom did cook curry and I did have rice and all that stuff. However, I knew when I was in college, I knew that for me, that belief system that I was brought into, even though I was an altar boy. I went to a elementary school, Catholic elementary school. I knew for me, I wanted to explore other things. So I studied from that point up until now, Buddhism, Jewish mysticism, all the way to Vedic philosophy. So I've really immersed myself in trying to understand what is the commonality, what is the actual gem of truth in it. And I realized something, that it's really the tension. I think all of us are trying to understand through our own lens how to explain certain things that happen to us. But really, it's about holding that dichotomy, it's holding that contradiction, and just being okay with holding that contradiction. So for me, I didn't know if I was going to live or die, to be honest with you, because a stem cell transplant is very precarious. You can get infections. You can not really regain vitality. Some people can't walk again. Some people can't think clearly. I knew what I was facing. And I think when it comes to anybody who's going through a challenging time, I think it's really important to allow yourself to figure out what your strengths are in any situation. So think back to yourself. Yes, this problem is really hard right now, but in my life, what else has been hard? And figure out, how did you find a way through that maze of difficulty? That's number one. Number two, it's really thinking for yourself, well, given the situation that I'm in, who did I lean on besides myself? Who did I lean on to give me some intelligence, some wisdom, some practical knowledge in order to be free of this? And I think the third thing, and it's really the most important thing, is allowing yourself to really feel the moment. Ask yourself, in this moment, for this challenge or this problem, this situation, where is it in my body? Do I feel it the most? Because when you identify and name a situation, you allow that power to be diffused. And if you can actually then locate where it's affecting your physicality, your physical body, you allow yourself to draw attention to that and ease that pain and that discomfort. Because as a wise friend once said to me, it's not about ignoring the discomfort. It's about going through the discomfort. It's about living in that discomfort.
I agree because I myself have went through not physically, but I have seen my close relative going through something like that, and the whole environment of the hospital is, like you said, so vulnerable and so difficult and so challenging to cope up with. And I read about this in the book called The Body Keeps the Score, where you need to, like self reflection, you just spoke about where is it happening in the body. You need to understand that I was not mature enough to realize at that moment. And speaking of vulnerable moments, I know that it is your cognitive skills at that time is impaired and you are not able to think as a leader. And I kept feeling that many professionals today are functioning externally but exhausted internally. Like the connect which you mentioned, they need to feel inside. And it's a modern work culture. Do you think that has disconnected people from themselves?
100%. A lot of the leaders and healthcare leaders that I work with, it really posits this idea that the pressure hasn't gone quiet, it's just gone internal, because performance doesn't fail first, clarity does. So that is when you either lose or you win. And most people think, let's just survive the crisis and we'll be okay. But that's not really where it is. It's about what happens after the crisis. How do you regulate? How do you recalibrate? How do you actually figure out a new way forward? But also, how do you actually figure out how to make peace with what just happened? How to actually understand what just happened? And how, if you're a leader, how to actually emulate that and embody that to such a degree that that then overflows to your team, your organization. Because what is a leader, Rohit? A leader doesn't have to be someone who's in a giant corporation. Yes, it can be, obviously. But a leader is just someone people want to emulate, want to mirror, want to follow, want to be. And by you allowing yourself to self-regulate, for me, it's meditation. I've been a long time meditator. For others, it's prayer. For others, it's journaling, taking a walk in silence and stillness. For other people, it's breathing exercises. Whatever it is for you, then make that work. I know for me, one of the hardest challenges in my life was this relapse. And for me, I created something called psychological distancing. This idea that I created a buffer between me and the problem. The Savio who was there in the hospital bed, and the other Savio who's actually thinking, okay, once I get out of here, what can I actually achieve and accomplish? But a large portion of that middle, what I call the post-crisis leadership gap, is really this ability to actually surrender, not to my situation, not to surrendering to death, but surrendering to the fact that there's only so much I can do. There's only so much that the team can do, but I need to meet them in the moment. I need to actually create that connection with them. And so I made sure that when they visited me in the hospital, the doctors, when they did the rounds, that I mustered some form of energy to meet them, because they weren't just healing me, we were healing each other. I had to be a participant in that ability to do that. And so it's very important in that moment to also create what I call adaptive resilience. People often talk about resilience as they bouncing back. And to a large degree, for about a decade, I was the picture of resilience. But adaptive resilience is when you're in that mess, that discomfort, that SHIT, that problem. How are you going to be flexible and create strategies from that? How are you going to allow and give intentional silence and space for what's actually happening? Because it's a process, it's a transformation, and you have to allow yourself that ability. And I also did a lot of reframing. So instead of seeing the chemo as poison, I saw it as an elixir, as mana from the universe, as sacred life force that's coming. And I had to be open to it. I had to be receptive to it. I had to surrender to it. I had to submit to it, because that's the only way that healing will occur, when you acknowledge what it is that's actually happening and what it is that you allow in your life to happen. Because a large portion of the time, the power is not always saying yes. The power is actually saying no to things that your former self, your former nervous system rejected to be okay with at the moment.
Yes, I totally agree because when I discovered running, I do marathon and it completely changed my life. I found something to go to against every struggle or challenges or aspect of life. It helped me deal with it. And like you said, to calm down the nervous system, exercise really helped me out. And you just mentioned about your journey, your beautiful journey connects healing with leadership. And I understand that healthcare environment are hands down in the world among, among the most high pressure environment. And how did your personal experience shape the way you now guide leader under pressure?
Yeah. So my background, as you know, professionally is in this space. But then if you're then tested and you're challenged when it actually happens in your lived experience, why do you think they often say that doctors don't make the good patients? Because that is
Mhm.
actually
Yeah.
true. They can give their expertise advice, all the trainings and learnings that they've done, all the experiences, but they themselves, when they're going through it, that's the test. And so for me, I was put to the test in that manner. I think it's important for all of us, including myself, to actually figure out for yourself what's, when things are happening in your life, what is it about that experience that's actually causing you anger, pain, sorrow, frustration. I want you to actually figure out for yourself what is the source of that. And sometimes the source is not very simple. Sometimes it's layered beneath other things. And this actually touches upon, you mentioned earlier that I did a TEDx talk. I did a TEDx talk about 2 years ago. It was called 7 Minutes to Wellness, How to Love Your Inner Stranger. And people look at me and they're like, what do you mean inner stranger? And I said, I left it nebulous on purpose because I want you to figure out what that means for you. And they're like, okay, so what does it mean for you? And I'm like, well, inner stranger for me, it was that young adult, that young child that never felt completely grounded or rooted. I always felt like I was friends with people. No one really did anything negative to me, but I never really felt connected really with people. And of course, I've learned through time and stuff to be okay with it. And so the woman was like, oh, yes. So for me, that inner stranger is that idealized professional woman that, that person that I want to be, I can't, or that sibling or that great mother that I want to be. And so I have an acronym to answer your question. It's within my framework. I have a framework called the Adaptive Resilience Leadership Framework, but in it, there's something called the ALOHA reboot. And ALOHA in Hawaiian means hello. So it's a hello to your inner self. And so the acronym is A, so acknowledge. Acknowledge where you are, what the situation is in my situation. I'm in the hospital, I'm in a quarantine room. I'm going to be here for at least a month. This is the situation. They're testing my blood every 4 hours to try to see what's actually happening. So just be honest with yourself. L stands for listening. So listen to your inner self. So in Hawaiian, there's a healing modality called huna healing. And in huna healing, they actually believe that the body not only gives you sensations, but has language, has consciousness, has something that it's trying to actually speak to you and tell you. How do you tap into that? You become silent and still, whether that's prayer or meditation or breathing, whatever the case may be. And so they believe that you can actually talk to the body. I call it the three brains, head, heart, and gut, but that's what the L in Aloha from my acronym means. O stands for opening. So open yourself up to this, whatever your belief system is, even if you don't have a belief system of any kind and you're atheist, just be open to seeing what is happening. H stands for harnessing. So harness this information, try to make the mental connection, see what works, what doesn't work. And then A stands for acknowledge. So acknowledge and act. I'm sorry, A stands for act. So act on this information that you receive. But there's a caveat, and the caveat is you have to have courage to act because a large portion of people changing, and this is through studies and through verified data, that it's called the models of change. It's not that people don't want to change. People don't know how to change. They don't know what stage of change they're in. Are they thinking about change, pre-contemplation? Are they actually in change? When they're in change, are they thinking about relapsing? So it's about allowing people the ability to actually figure out how to change. And so a large portion of this, and I tell people, even if you don't have 7 minutes a day, you can break it down and do one of the acronyms a day. Do acknowledge one day for 1 minute and see how far that gets you. And to just answer your question in a in a long form sort of way, these sort of allow people to come back to themselves because to a large degree, I think we all hide behind masks and identities and roles, especially in healthcare leadership, where if we don't put on that particular role, then people will think less than of us rather than being more true.
Right. Speaking of this framework, Aloha, I can connect it with the mind chattering I was dealing with. This noise in my head, I realized that it's pretty negative. I know biologically it's supposed to be like that to protect ourselves, but it was pretty strong and rude. And my tone when I speak Hindi or my mother language is different. But when I speak English, it's different. And this is something I've noticed that I'm more kinder in English. And I think I've learned it during the process. And coming back to the framework, that is, I did acknowledge that the mind chattering is pretty negative nature. I started listening to it and I was open to change. And like you said, I started harnessing from it, I started noting it down, and later I started acting on it on purpose, trying to change the brain wiring. I don't know if this making sense or not, but I think it helped me connect with myself, especially emotionally and mentally. This is the change which I have observed. When I when we first spoke, I started to link it with my own experiences, and this is what I came up with, and I thought I should share it with you because the framework is really impactful, and especially during the stress, healing, and burnout. And recently, I was listening to this. He's a lawyer. He's also an influencer, Jeffrey. He makes reels, and he told that the first word that comes from your mouth should be breathing. It
Mm.
should be breathe. It gives you space to think. Then you say what you want to say. And coming back to the leadership, how can someone stay ambitious and disciplined without emotionally burn out? Because there is so much of things that is going on in life. So what can one do?
Sure. So obviously, cognitive pressure, cognitive overload is the number one thing that's a lot of us face. So a lot of my coaching work, especially with executives, is really about moving those feelings through a system or a filter. So I like to tell people, because all of us are mostly in our heads, think of it as an elevator and you're going down the elevator shaft. And so this is whatever number. And so let's say this is one, the first floor. You're going to the lower floors and you're actually going down into the heart and to the gut and to the other regions of your body. And a lot of data has pointed to the fact that the heart actually resonates not only emotion, not only some level of vibration or frequency, but it actually guides decision making. Do you actually think people, when they shop, they actually shop because they actually need the product? No, they shop because something triggers a memory or a feeling or a sensation. Something is in there, and then they relate to the product because it made them feel good or it made them feel safe. And all of us are looking for safety one way or the other. So I would say first acknowledge where that is happening, like I mentioned previously about in the body, but also where is that memory actually being triggered from? And what is that full memory informing you of? Another thing that you can actually do is actually allow yourself some brain dump. I just want you to brain dump, whether you're someone like me who likes to type. I love to type. I can brain dump all day long rather than handwriting. I'm not as good as I used to be or fluent as I used to be with that. Just brain dump and actually figure out what are the words that are coming, what are the phrases that are coming out, what are the memories that are coming out. I think is really important. And then I would say the fourth thing really is trying to have some level of patterning or signaling with that information. So AI is good with this. If you trust your AI to actually have the data and then actually form some sort of connections with that, it can't really give you data that you yourself have not revealed. So if there's things that are hidden behind the words and the phrases that you wrote, AI can't really help you discern that. But I tell people to use AI in that realm because we are a font of information. A lot of us have a lot of data within ourselves that are stored within us. And so it just allows just easier time to unpack those particular things. When it comes to leadership, though, in general, I think, especially healthcare leaders, because it's high stakes and they deal with not only they themselves, their organization, but another human being, they often have to they can't fall back on not knowing. They have to have the answer. And if they don't have the answer, then they themselves feel like they're not living up to those standards. And I think for them, it's a particular challenge, especially when I speak on stages and I, coach. And I even right now I'm running a interview series with CEOs and CMOs on the healthcare leadership operating system. And in the US, I can only speak for the US, there's $935 billion of healthcare waste a year. Why do you think that is? The reason why it's not just equipment, it's in human beings making ill decisions or poor decisions. And so the decision making in and of itself is not really accurate. So the first thing is identify. Second thing is name. Third thing is where actually that appears within the vicinity or the reference point of your life, whether that's in a situation or within your body. And then figure out for yourself how to unravel that information so you can actually make sense of it. Because I tell people all the time now, in an age of disruption, with at least I can speak for my country, politically, socially, and now technologically, all of us with AI, it's not about having more content, it's about having more connection. And the connection
Mm.
first starts with ourselves. It doesn't always start with another person.
This framework, 7 minute aloha reboot, it and whatever you just mentioned, it seems that you have a lot of practical and approachable framework that you know if you put it into practice, it feels manageable and it's easy to remember, and it sounds very realistic because the check from top to bottom which you just advised, it is something that the coach Bennett of Nike running, he also says that you need to do a body check from top to bottom. You need to feel that where is you're feeling the pressure, where is the tension. And I guess this practical framework from my personal experience, it is very effective. And was that the intention to make the emotional well-being more practical and accessible in everyday life?
I could sit here with you, Rohit, and I can probably spit out five different other frameworks. But at the end of the day, people don't want information. They want bite-sized information that's actionable, that allows them to actually feel that they're connected to it, that they actually can incorporate. What's the point of telling someone to do something when they're not going to do it? Did you know before digital prescriptions were a thing, when doctors would give you that physical paper and they would sign it, do you know the adherence that offices, medical offices would find those prescriptions in the garbage can, in the bathroom garbage can, or in the garbage can when they left the doctor's office? Because they just didn't want to do it. They
Oh,
just weren't interested in adhering. Why? Because they're overwhelmed, they're scared, they don't believe the doctor, they think that they know better than the doctor, or that they feel like they know their body better than the doctor, right? And so those
mm,
five elements really allow them to not execute on that, to not actually listen to expertise or expert advice because they felt that the doctor wasn't in their corner or someone that they trusted in order to fix this particular problem of theirs. And also time investment. Did they feel like they could actually give time of themselves to take the medication, to come back to the doctor's office and tell them how the medication was, to get another test or another scan? No, because that's just what us humans, we like shortcuts. Why do you think doom scrolling is a huge thing? We just want to like fritter our time away. So I did intentionally want to make it easy. I wanted to make it memorable. I wanted to make it fun, but I also wanted to make sure that the language was something that made sense as well to other people, that the language wasn't so simplistic that, yeah, they often say, try to explain your vision or your thesis in like a 5-year-old would understand. I don't want that
mm,
either because 5-year-olds are not, they don't, at least most of them don't have problems, right? Maybe some of them
right.
might be bullied by their classmates, but they don't have like real world human problems like we do. So it was intentional. And I also wanted to allow people the ability to make it bite sized for themselves. And I know time is a big issue for people, so I made sure that I quantified it by saying that it was 7 minutes.
And I totally agree since I know I have experienced it firsthand, and it does work. It does. And has your definition of success changed from external achievement to something more internal and meaningful today? Because for me, after COVID, my priorities literally changed. I used to be more dedicated at work, but I realized that work life balance, the personal life is also very important, and literally it changed my perspective. So, again, is the like success change from external achievement to something more internal and meaningful?
Well, thank you for talking about COVID. COVID was a shock to everyone. COVID
Mm,
allowed us the opportunity to really figure out what was really important in our lives. COVID, I think, also gave us what I call the power in the pause. It gave us that pause to actually reflect.
yeah,
And to a large degree, a lot of things happened. In my world, they talked about things like strategic reversals, increasing ramp, return on investment when it comes to
mm,
actually newfound treatment protocols, which means nothing to the average layman, right? The layman just wants something fixed, they just want the answers. So for me, beyond COVID, beyond my own personal situations, I was part of the dot com boom back in the late 90s and also was part of the dot com crash. I have invested in businesses that failed. I've given of myself. I've been through other things, cancer once, and now cancer relapse twice. But I will say the cancer relapse and the treatment involved not only from mainstream medicine, but integrative modalities as well. I explored everything except for psychedelics because healing is not linear and I will die by that sword. For me, my priorities have shifted to a degree. I'm glad that I had the foundation of a Catholic faith, but I'm also very happy that I explored other belief systems because they inform my idea of truth and what actually truth means. One of
Mm.
my greatest lessons, and this wasn't for me, this is something that I learned, was that if you find error in truth, you don't discard the truth, you discard the error.
Okay.
And
Wow.
that's something that I have to say that when I was younger, I would discard the full truth. You never discard the full truth. You discard the error within the truth. You make peace. You allow the contradiction to sit where it is. You allow that to be what it is. And so for me, I would say I'm not too attached to a lot of things, Rohit, to be honest.
Mm.
But I also know the dangers of being too detached. And so I
Mm.
try to live in the middle ground. It's a push and pull, it's tension, but it's a adventurous tension. And so for me, my viewpoint has changed about what I think success is. My viewpoint has changed what I think that I need to be or emulate. You can probably relate to me. Grew up in an Indian household. As soon as I was told I was in remission or complete response to treatment, my parents were like, "Okay, go back to work.
Mhm.
Go do." And I'm like, I don't feel like myself. I how can I go and do if I don't feel like myself? So I said, I need to feel more like me. I need to feel complete. Maybe I won't be the same level I was before, but at least I can understand what's happening because I paint you this picture, and people will probably, if they see this video, will probably look at me or hear me and think, "Oh, this guy doesn't look like he was ever sick." But I was sick, and I was with this situation. I just made it a point to focus on healing so intently, so vigorously, so fearlessly that nothing else mattered for me. And so for me, I allow life to bring to me what it needs to bring. For me, really relate to Eastern philosophy in the sense that the river does not rush, the sea does not rush. The seed has roots underneath, it grows the way it grows. The river knows its direction. Even
Mm.
if the river bends, there's an expanse that awaits. And so I'm in action of things, but therefore I am not beholden to things. I'm not allowing those things that may or may not happen in my life to dictate how I feel about myself. Yes, I'm human. I'm frustrated. I want things to be done quicker. Yes, I still want to progress my initiatives. I still want to do my work. But I also have surrendered to the fact that to a large degree, there's only so much I can do. That sometimes it's not about optimizing. Sometimes the recovery is just about being and being still and silent within.
That's powerful. On that was really very positive. I felt good about that. And finally, what does healthy leadership and meaningful life look like in a world that is, like you just mentioned, constantly pushing people toward instant gratification, speed, pressure, and productivity?
Well, this piggybacks into this idea of crisis. Most people think you can solve the crisis and everything's good, but it's about what happens afterwards. So, to answer your question, it's really about how do you reorientate what life is from this moment forward. Maybe, maybe it's not about being the person you were before. Maybe the truth, maybe the transformation, maybe the aha moment, maybe the big discovery is about being okay with where you are. Maybe what you assumed would make you happy is not going to make you happy. So allow yourself, no matter what your situation is, mine happened to be this, yours could be whatever. Allow yourself the grace, the wisdom, and give yourself the permission to just be fine with where you are now, rather than feeling that you have to have expectations or others have expectations of where you need to be. Allow yourself and free yourself from this idealized version of what you think success is, what you even think leadership is, what you even think that your particular framework of how you want to see your life be. Allow yourself to just be okay with today and be more present and authentic. Those are two words everyone uses, but in this situation, presence is really taking a breath.
Wow. Yeah. So I was just listening to you and it literally moved me again. So this conversation felt deeply grounding and meaningful for me personally. And I think a lot of people listening today will reflect differently on resilience, discipline, leadership, success, and even the relationship they have with themselves internally. Savio, thank you once again for sharing your wisdom and experiences with us today. Thank you so much, Savio. Again, if our audiences want to reach out to you, where can we find you?
Thanks so much, Rohit. Yes, they can find me at my website, saviopclemente.com, SAVIOPCLEMENTE.com. On there, they can find my keynote work. I have a few more spots left for 2026. They can find out my TEDx talk, 7 Minutes to Wellness, How to Love Your Inner Stranger, my book. And every Wednesday, I have a Substack newsletter that's called The Human Resolve, where I talk about the head, heart, and gut intelligence, what I call the three brains. And currently, I'm running that interview series with CEOs and CMOs on the healthcare leadership operating system. And then if they want to find me on social media, I'm at every platform at the Human Resolve. And I call it the Human Resolve because what else do we have, Rohit? We have resolution and resolve in our lives. That's the only thing we have.